Hey, what's up, guys? Real quick, I had updated Wednesday. Every Wednesday, I update the webcomic I'm doing right now, the Peacock. And I figure the profile page, right? What is the Peacock? Well, it's a superhero parody comedy. The misadventures of a young, rich, progressive crime fighter who must wear more than one mask in his one-man battle for justice. The only thing more unexpected than his enemies are his allies. I thought that came up pretty good. Second series in the Children of Wrath universe, right? Silent Girls Club is the other one. Now, when you're looking at this, you're probably like, wow, it's very, looks very like girly, very shoujo-ish, very 80s, very glam, right? And there's a lot of rainbow people in it. Well, if you're gonna subvert the subverters, right, you sort of got to get in there. So, but at the same time, some of the rainbow characters are actually good. So, I believe in nuance. I'm not gonna do what SJWs and their ilk did for the past 15 years, portraying our side as not only like one-dimensional idiot, with characters who are easily defeated. I'm not gonna do that. Okay, I like having nuance, even against the opposition, because you got to understand these people better. Not to mention that you have, the old school anime influence on me is huge. Okay, the old manga influence. In those stories, the villains were usually more powerful than the hero. Okay, and the heroes really had to even just to survive. Really had to go up and above and beyond. Okay, and that's what really makes the comic great. You had every half the comics for a while was just like shaved head lesbian Avengers, high kicking, big muscle, masculine Nazi guys or whatever. As a light skinned gay black friend was looking on, cheering her. I mean, and I'll say the arch villains in each of these series too. I like to think that they're nuanced characters, even though they represent, both of them represent certain things that I think are a problem. But even they're not only just powerful, they're actually very capable characters. They're very competent characters. Like I said, they're better. They're better than the heroes, And to defeat them, the heroes really got to level up. That's what these stories are supposed to be, I guess. Tell people that. So, heroism and values for the comics are actually important. Okay, unfortunately, they've been used for propaganda, and they've been used for propaganda for a long time, probably from their inception. And that sort of segues into this a little bit. My friend Nero, he said, "Yeah, dude, I had the comics I had as a kid. I'm getting rid of them. You want them?" And I was like, I had like 2 boxes of them. Like, yeah, sure. So, and most of them were war stuff. The Nam, even the Semper Fi. I forgot they had made a Marine Corps comic that was sort of associated with the Nam. But I remember this as a kid. Okay, this is near the end of the American war, the DC war comics were going to be ended by '88. They were pretty much gone, and this is when Bob Kanigher started really writing some really nasty, gritty stories. And this one was, what is this? Who is this guy? Well, this is the origin. Oh, this is the origin of the Iron Major, Frank Redondo. I think Frank Redondo. I think he was one of the Filipino artists. The style, when I look at this guy's style now, the art style, this looks like the Filipino style. And also, like I said, Rob Kanigher's stories are getting a lot more brutal like this in it. Anyway, just the main thing with this was it was interesting seeing the story. Of course, the Iron Major, he has an iron hand. He actually, when him and Sgt Rock get in a fist fight, he usually he almost always gets the better of Sgt Rock, and he always manages to get away at the end. So, like I said, he's one of the few recurring villains, I guess. But in this one, he's not so much a villain anymore. He gets a backstory. Now, in terms of the comic, yeah, it's still, Bob Kanigher, just like most of the comics industry, You know what they are, right? But still, to do this is interesting. This, I think, pretty much was the first in representation in American war comics. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. This is the first representation ever seen of the Eastern Front. Okay, and of like the actual Eastern Front, not like there were episodes. I remember the GI Combat where they're helping the, the nice plucky partisans in the Soviet Union, right? Remember how they used to jump ahead? Like they would fight the Japanese, and they'd fight in Russia, then they'd fight in North Africa. Anyway, but this was the first representation of the Eastern Front in American comic, and it was pretty brutal. I remember as a kid being like, "Whoa!" I was just starting to realize that in World War II there actually had been another front. I had no idea. I had no idea my family. I had no idea that the men in my family in the military, most of them died fighting these things. And just to see him in this combat scene, I'm pretty sure Redondo is a Filipino artist. They had a sense of motion. I would argue is superior to the American artists. Just saying. But yeah, you don't see stuff like this until like Garth Ennis gets into like the '90s in the war comics in DC. Take that, Ivan, right? So, hey, the rest of the comic, I mean, it gets, in the end, the evil Germans, cannibalism, shows how he got the Iron Hand. He was saving his comrade, and his hand got gangrene from trying to save him, Oh, and you got all hanging partisans. You'll have to answer for these murders one day. Yeah, okay, the world may forget, but God won't. Well, it's interesting. Who are the murderers? Okay, it's time to reevaluate things now. When you say, all right, let's not get into that. So, and the fact that Kanigher did a story of this guy is making him a nuanced character with depth rather than the one-dimensional, smiling, major villain for so many decades. Was a lot. Like, you had scenes like this, right, where the mother's like, "Oh, your hand," I will keep the light burning for you, my son, until this terrible war is over. Right? And then you see, of course, I always remember this, right? When he gets home, mother, right? The candle's burning, lighting the way for me. And she died waiting for him. So just seeing this, a lot of credit to Bob Kanigher. So I know people say he was a little crazy, but remember, Bob Kanigher wrote the first, probably only American comic that had a German main character, Enemy Ace, right? So I argue, right, also Archie Goodwin's run, J Combat, you had more nuanced war stories, even in DC Comics, okay? But regardless, and that was, and of course it always ends where, the Iron Major, he disappeared, they couldn't find him afterwards, but it's kind of interesting. Like I said, there's 84. In about 4 years, the war comics are kaput, But yeah, it was like going down memory lane with this one. So, man, the battle scene, dude. Now, obviously, the British comics were much different. The British war comics, they did a lot of Eastern Front stories. The Hellman was the big one. Garth Ennis sort of revived that. And also the Death Squad, which I had gone over, I think, last winter. So, yeah, this is definitely a Filipino artist. I can tell by the style. Anyway, always the war.